Welcome in. It's another edition of Puck the Huskies podcast. Jason Puckett, Elise Woodward, Jordan Reffett. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Go visit Georgetown Brewery. It's owned and operated by two diehard Huskies who lately have been drinking themselves into stupor because of the play of their favorite of their football team. Their tap room is open. Go down there and drown your sorrows. 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Go visit georgetownbeer.com. Elise, I got to start first with you. What that scene on TV, man, I mean, I've seen it before, the whiteout and what they do at Penn State. It looks like freaking bananas, man. What was it like to be on the field to watch that?
God, you guys, it was really cool. I'm not going to lie. It's for me what makes college football a true spectacle and how fun it is. And the NFL obviously has the best dudes that are freaks of nature that are, 6'4" and move and they're 250. But college football, the way that it is with the pageantry. So I was lucky enough. I was coming out a little bit, about an hour before, and the Penn State players were coming out of their section to go out onto the field. And the amazing thing about it was an hour before kickoff, an hour. And there was, it was 110,000 people that came to that game. There was probably at least 80,000 people in the stands an hour before. So I was talking to one of the Penn State security guys, and I was like, it's still an hour before kickoff. Don't these people want to tailgate some more? Or I don't know what I do an hour before kickoff if I'm not working. And he's like, oh, man, they've been here since 6 a.m. They're not thirsty anymore. And I was like, okay. But you walked out, and, it was an optical illusion with all the white and the pom-poms, and literally there was a teeny pocket of Husky fans in the second the second upper deck level on the goal line, and that was it. The rest was all white. It was really cool. It was fun to see. It was fun to be a part of. In terms of it being loud, it was loud, but it wasn't as loud as Husky Stadium in my opinion, and it wasn't as loud as some of the places we've been. Despite it's kind of like Michigan, the sound just kind of evaporates. Mm-hmm. But in terms of everything else about it, it was really cool. They didn't leave early either, most of them. It was an impressive display from the Penn State fans for sure.
Jordan, it was not over real quick, but early on you could get a sense it wasn't going to go the way of Washington. What's the takeaway from the game? What's the learning curve or the lessons learned here by not only the players but the staff?
Well, I think the big thing is that you look at Penn State's offensive line, you look at their defense, you look at the type of guys that they've recruited along the way, and they were bigger, stronger, and faster than the Huskies are right now. Like I said, the Huskies have really great skill position guys, but unfortunately right now we are not in a position to have an offensive line that can really impose their will. And that's why I think it was really smart for Coach Fisch to put on Demon Williams in the second half, because Will Rogers does not do well when the pocket breaks down really quickly. But I think the big thing for me is that first drive, they were moving the football. They were doing a lot of good things. Just like at Indiana, just like at some of these road games, you clank it off the upright or you throw an interception right off the bat. These are things that can't happen on the road against a top 5 team. It just can't happen if you're going to have a chance to be competitive. And then the next drive, we lose probably arguably our top 2 player on defense.
I hate that rule.
It was an egregious call. That was totally different than the targeting calls that I've seen. I agree, lowered his head a little bit, but he finished with his hips and his eyes up. And I guess according to the way the rule is, obviously you gotta call that, I guess. But to me, the rule to throw a player out is so bad, just because the way that on the road, the guy's in a wideout, he's playing well, he makes an amazing play, and then he gets thrown out of the game. So that was a huge downer, along with the Grady Gross field goal miss, and then really it was just downhill from there. They could not stop them. They were one thing that really blew me away is that the Huskies played pretty well on first and second down. They got them to 3rd and 6, they got them to 3rd and 7 several times. Well, really, I think it was they were 8 for 8 on 3rd down. That really broke the back of the Huskies, and then them scoring that extra touchdown at half to make it 28-0 was really when the game probably ended, because I thought they had a chance if they could come out with Demon Williams and score some points to get some things going. They never got in the end zone. And unfortunately, it was one of those games where true talent on the offense and defensive lines was a difference in the game, and they were head and shoulders above Washington.
Elise, you've seen. Yeah, go ahead,
I was going to say real quick, Puck, what's the best tight end performance that you've seen, Jordan, from an opponent in Husky history? Because that dude is a beast, and it reminded me of one dude that went on and had a little bit of success in the NFL. But anybody come to mind?
Gronk.
Gronk at Arizona had 3 touchdowns against Washington, and I was like, this dude is just bigger and stronger than everybody and had good hands and was a freak. And what they did with Warren Harvey, they moved him all over the place. He was a wildcat quarterback. He was freaking a fullback. That guy was running routes. I'm not, he seemed as big and as strong as any tight end that we have seen in some time. Like, impressive dude that, I mean, I'm assuming he's going to be a top draft pick, but boy, what a weapon. And he was the difference in the game, in my opinion. They got down the goal line, and the Husky defense has proven to be good on the goal line all season long. And he just was beast mode. He was a little bit of Jack Coletto from Oregon State when, he's just a linebacker out there that he's just bouncing guys off him. And that was cool to see. He was a hell of a player, I'll say that.
Well, and that defensive end was unblockable.
Beast.
I mean, just to watch him as a defensive player, I hated seeing the Huskies, getting beat like a drum like that. But he was unblockable, and he's been unblockable for most of the year. The guy is a freak coming off the edge. Those are the type of guys, that 5-star, surefire NFL player that you recruit at Penn State or Ohio State or Alabama or some of these big schools. Those are the guys that make differences in games, right? So those are the guys that you got to get on your team if you want to be at that elite level, right?
Yeah.
But it was the team that they had was very impressive. I think some people that downplay Penn State just because they don't score a lot of points against maybe Ohio State or some of these really good teams, their team is as good as any. They got some players, they got some 5-star and a lot of NFL talent and guys that came back that could have went to the NFL last year. So, I mean, they were hungry. That Ohio State game, I think, pissed them off a little bit where they had a chance to win that game against Ohio State, and I think that gave them some motivation to come out and really, really play well against Washington, and they did.
Yeah, I think everybody felt like they were driving the speed limit, and those 2 dudes were, up at about 85 miles an hour. They just were different.
Elise, and being down, and Jordan, you can talk about this too, is just in watching the games, and I know the games you've been there in person, but at least being down on the field, and when you go into these Big Ten environments, is it just a noticeable difference? It seems to me the style of play, that the athlete that they have on both lines is just different in that conference. Is that a fair assessment, or are we making too much out of it?
No, I do think, like, when you're checking the height and the weights, that they're naturally tending, like, there's 2 ways that you're going to build your offensive line, especially where you're going to be the big, 305, 320 pound, in that range, those big dudes that maybe aren't as swift of foot because you're not running the spread. You're not doing, some of the other, run and shoot offenses and the things where you need to be able to get out and run. They're definitely, like, they're wide bodies. There's some refrigerators on the offensive line when I've seen it, where just the eye test, you go out there and warm up, you're like, you're not going to move that guy ever. Now, you maybe not want him to, try to pull and get around the edge and do something tricky there, but they're big dudes that are on the offensive and the defensive line as well. It's just, it is a bit of a different style, but, like, we've talked about it. I am convinced, like, watching the skill guys, that the skill guys from the Pac-12 era especially the quarterbacks we've seen recently, that they don't even stand a candle to the ones they're seeing now. The ones, it's not as electrifying, and like some of the running backs and some of the wide receivers that we've seen in the Pac-12 throughout the years. I mean, we're talking about a tight end that was the difference maker for Penn State, right? He was bigger and stronger. He wasn't going to run away from you. So that part, it's a little, the way they build the roster is a little bit different for sure.
You see that, Jordan?
100%. No, I agree 100%. I think that head and shoulders the Pac-12 when it comes to quarterbacks and skill guys, and really when you look at the way that their defenses are built. I mean, they are a run first, play defense conference, right? It's totally different than what Washington and the Pac-12 was built on, where it was quarterbacks throw the ball around the lot, and defense be damned, you better make 1 or 2 extra stops, right? And I think that was the difference in terms of, just seeing these guys. Washington, for whatever reason, recruiting-wise, is that we were developing the Vita Veas and the Greg Gaines. These guys were not 4- and 5-star guys, right? When we had really elite defensive linemen, they were usually 3-star guys. And when you get to the Big Ten, you're getting guys from the Midwest and the Northeast that are 5-star guys ready to play right now. And some of the big guys that come out of Washington went to Ohio State that are defensive linemen, right, that we know of, and went to the Midwest to go play D-line. But you just don't see as much guys that are in that high-level 5-star guys in the Pac-12 on the offensive and defensive lines. You just don't see it as much. They weren't recruited out west like they were in the Midwest and maybe the Southeast, just because they're built differently. I mean, it's true. Well, the Pac-12 West Coast football could play with anybody. We thumped Texas 2 years in a row. There's no doubt that Washington could play when we were elite with anybody in the country. But as we went through the transformation now, is that we need to build back up. It was obvious in that game, and really in the Indiana game too, that we need to build our offensive line, our defensive line up. And even by the grades through PFF and some of these guys, how many sacks they've given up, how many pressures they've given up. There's a lot of things to look at on that Husky offense and defensive line. The depth is something that we talk about till we're blue in the face. We're just not there right now.
Okay, I'm gonna ask this. Oh, go ahead, Elise.
I was just going to say what's going to be interesting for everybody, but I think especially for Washington, is that when you're trying to build an offensive line, traditionally, like we were talking before the show, my brother was an offensive lineman. So you come in and you used to get dudes that were like, 260, 270, you have them put on 30 pounds, you redshirt them, they don't play at all as redshirt. Like, it's a 3-year process to get those guys most of the time. And that's the way that it has been forever and ever and ever. And so now with NIL and with the transfer portal, I'm fascinated by the fact of how do you build an offensive line? It is different than a running back, Jonah Coleman, that you can pluck and be like, here you go, man, run to the A gap. It's just different with those guys, how they have to be 5 guys in sync who have known each other. That's the traditional way for years. The Huskies were behind the 8 ball and trying to just get bodies for their offensive line this year, because they 2 guys right now are starting for Ole Miss that were Husky starters last year on the offensive line, and other guys at Alabama. 2 of their tackles are in the league. So they had to start over from scratch. Like, you can't be patient to build. But moving forward, are they going to get a bunch of linemen on signing day? And then how many years to develop? That takes time. But then it's really hard to go get starting offensive linemen in the portal. It's a challenge. So I'll be very curious the approach. I mean, not just for Washington, it's for everybody, of going and building a really great offensive line. What's going to be the strategy?
Well, why couldn't we be like Ole Miss, right? Where's our money at to go get two starters from the best offensive line in college football last year? That's what you have to do if you want to be in the top 10 or top 20 like Ole Miss did. I mean, I was surprised as anybody with Nate Kalipo. Some of these local guys to leave really pissed me off, and I don't know the situation, what money was offered to stay. And obviously there's a transition with Coach Fisch coming in, and does he even know the NIL situation when he gets there, and those guys are leaving as soon as he gets there. But you're right. I mean, I'm scared with how our offensive line is set up right now, because we were so behind the 8 ball, and defensive line for that matter. But had it to where we're going to have to go out there and go get 2 starters from somewhere. Maybe their coach leaves, right? They get fired, or they take another job, and we can go in there and pluck 2 guys that don't like the new coach, or they don't like whatever, or they want to make money. But Washington has to find a way to fix this offensive line issue, because like you said, it's got to start soon, because these guys got to play during spring, because that's what makes me nervous. You hit it so well on the head, Elise, that these guys have to play well, but they have to play well together. They have to know what each other's doing. That's what makes a great offensive line. Yeah. It's not that they're all great, amazing players. Sometimes they mesh so well together. They know what the other person's doing. They can, really, I mean, if a guy can come off a block when you're running a TE stunt, that's such a huge aspect. The guys, I've seen Washington miss that so many times, or somebody's right in the face, because you always block down. You always make sure you cover the inside first, right? But I've seen us jump outside and leave the middle wide open. And those are things that you have to go through with your brothers to get that kind of bond. So it'll be interesting to see.
All right, so I'm going to ask this next question now. This is from an outside perspective. Don't Elise, stop yelling at me. and I'm going to put myself in a position of if I were a fan of Washington.
I like that perspective.
Okay. I wouldn't understand continuing to start Will Rogers because of where it's at, where the season is now. You're looking at the horizon of what's left on the schedule. And I know you got UCLA and then it's Oregon, right? Those are the last two games?
Yeah.
Why not give a guy who's going to be your quarterback of the future time now?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Well, just rather than, I mean, you want one more victory to become bowl eligible to play in the Independence Bowl.
100%.
So, but
could be the Holiday Bowl. You never know.
Well, I mean, likely would be the Independence Bowl. I'm just wondering, is that more important than developing a guy real reps who's going to be your starting quarterback for next season rather than Will Rogers?
I mean, I can handle this absolutely. Like, because when you look back on it, you've got some guys that have been here and have been loyal to Washington that are seniors that are in their sixth season. And I would be damned if you're like, you don't matter. I'm sorry. We don't care about you and how you leave your legacy, because it's about a true freshman that may or may not be the starter next year. We don't know. Like, you never know what happens in the off season, right? No, I don't agree with that at all. I think for them, you play as hard as you possibly can play as long as you can play it. And from, I'll just tell you field perspective. Will Rogers has some major strengths, absolutely major strengths. When he's getting guys in his face, he is not as adept at Demond at moving the pocket and getting out. When the pocket is clean and he has time, he's a better quarterback. He throws a better ball. He is obviously a fifth-year senior, and he gives you the best chance to win against UCLA, in my opinion. And that's not to slight Demond at all. He's an 18, 19-year-old dude, and he's doing great. He's gotten plenty of reps this year. Plenty of reps. It's not as if he hasn't seen the field. No, I would be. It's when the Huskies were 4-7 playing the Apple Cup, and randomly out of nowhere they started Sam Heward. I felt bad for Sam because Sam, you have to be ready. There's a lot of other things that go on in that, and the Huskies are still playing for a bowl game. This is not. You got to beat UCLA, and then you're in. And you're not going to start an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid on the road at the number one team in the nation the following week at Oregon and set him up. Like, so no, I don't even think, to me, I'm glad that they decided that Will Rogers is the dude. And if need be, to change a pace, if the pocket's collapsing and he's getting pressured, then you go to Demond at some point in the game. That's the way I would play it.
No, absolutely. I think that I totally get where this hypothetical fan is coming from because, this has been on Twitter. It's been a big topic, right? Obviously, the media has been asking Coach Fisch about it. It's something that people have talked about. Why not start Demond? Why not start Demond? This was in the middle of the season, too, when Will had some struggles. But against teams where we can protect Will, he is 100%, no doubt about it, the better quarterback. Like I said, when he's in the pocket and it's clean, he's been really, really good, and done some really good things. So when you're at home, the season's on the line against UCLA.
Yeah.
These seniors have one more opportunity to play in a bowl game, and people sometimes don't think that's a big deal. It's massive. To these kids, it's everything. It's the only thing that matters. They're going to have a great week of practice. These guys are fired up. It's going to be absolutely electric on Friday at Husky Stadium because of the fact that we have to get this win. So to me, Will Rogers does give them the best chance to win. Demond Williams is an absolute stud. He's a great change of pace. He could probably go in there and do a lot of really good things if he played the whole game. But I also don't think it's fair, like Elise said, to throw him in down there at Oregon as a true freshman down there when he hasn't played enough football to really understand maybe how that's going to go in an environment like that. So I get it. I get where the clamorings come from. But it doesn't make sense to not start Will at the last home game. And as a senior, this is his last go-around as well. And he gives you the best chance to win. And we're going to protect him. I mean, this is not Penn State's defensive line. This is not, a team that we cannot match up well with. If we don't match up well with, Will has problems. Okay? We've seen that. But this is a team that UW can match up well with, and they should beat at home. So they're favored. I see Washington coming out and playing well on Friday night. I see a W for the Dogs.
Do you think – I asked this to John Canzano this week. Do you think and I agree with them, but I think you won't agree. Do you think NIL plays a part in this? The decision to keep Will Rogers the starting quarterback. They probably invested nearly $1 million in him.
I don't think at this point. No, I don't. I mean, I do think early in the season when you're talking about who's going to win a starting position, and it's just like you guys. It's so similar to we go down to spring training. You see a dude that the Mariners spent a lot of money on, but he's getting outplayed by. You're like, oh God, what are you going to do now? Well, I mean, that's always, but that has not been the case at all. Will Rogers has been he has been a very good quarterback. You look at his numbers, you look at touchdowns to interceptions, you look at what he's been able to do. When he's not getting chased, he's been good. When he gets chased, it's a different quarterback. And DeMond is best when he's getting chased. When you just make him stand in the pocket like Russell Wilson back in the day, then it's a different kind of quarterback. So it's just two totally different styles of quarterback. And I think that they've done a relatively good job of getting both of them in to exploit the defense at certain times. Now, it hasn't been perfect, and I'm not going to say that it has been, but he's gotten a lot of reps for a true freshman. But look, he hasn't been perfect either. He's a true freshman trying to learn. I mean, DeGraff was wide open on that flea flicker, and all he had to do was lob it. I mean, there was nobody within 30 yards of him, and he drove it. And that's just a freshman that, you gotta have. You don't need a rocket arm on every play. So you just, those are the things that, those reps will add up and build up. But I mean,
well, that makes the score 28-13, right? It's not to say it's a totally different game, but it is. I mean, Penn State's now getting to where they now have to score because DeMond's doing some things, right? So 28-13 is a lot different than 35-6, right? So the big thing with DeMond is that I think NIL has its place when it comes to the beginning of the season and how guys are doing. But these coaches are also playing for their jobs. A lot of times, Coach Fisch is not. He is obviously in a position where this year he's going to get a mulligan regardless of what happens. They might go 5-7. He's not getting fired. And he's not going to be in a situation because he was put in a situation where really anyone would have a lot of challenges with this roster. The schedule ended up being very, very tough when you go back and look at Indiana's a top 5 team, Penn State's a top 5 team, Oregon's number 1. You got 3 games against top 5 teams on the road. So I mean they have a very difficult schedule. But to me, I think playing DeMond also is a good thing for our offense, but it's also an opportunity to make sure DeMond is happy going into next year. I do think that's not part of it to where it's, hey, we got to put him in the game. He helps us, but it's also a good thing where DeMond feels like I'm going to be the guy next year. I'm going to stick around. I'm not going to take these calls from X, Y, and Z because I'm going to be the next Husky quarterback.
What about senior night coming up against UCLA? It's a class that's, has been through it all, right? You got a national championship appearance, and now you lose a coach. And now you're going, to a brand new staff, Elise, and now, fighting to get into a bowl game. So there was some ups and downs for them, but a senior class that I think they'll look back on it and go, they did some pretty damn good things there.
You guys, it's not just one coaching change. How about 3 coaches in 6 years? They were recruited by Chris Peterson, then they played under Jimmy Lake, then they played under Kalen DeBoer, and now they've played under Jedd Fisch. That's crazy. They were part of that 4-8 team years ago with Jimmy Lake. They've also been a part of that COVID year that when they were 3-1 and didn't get to go play, and Oregon took their spot because they had too many guys sick. Like they when you think about COVID, and nobody wants to think about that and how miserable it was for everybody. I mean, these guys absolutely got screwed in so many different ways. So I'm glad that they have their 6 year of eligibility. I think Carson Bruner is one of my all-time favorite Huskies. The guy is an absolute warrior. You guys, he is in so much pain and dealing with so much to get out on the field. And it's incredible that he continues to will himself, not just for his own personal satisfaction, but for his guys and for the university. And that is what college football is all about to me. I mean, he is your old school. Obviously, he's a legacy kid. He grew up wearing purple and gold. His dad might be the nicest guy on the face of the earth. And his mom, Tracy's a doll. For that particular family is why I want them. And Cam Bikilanen is an absolute warrior stud who stuck around when the rest of his secondary, is either playing in the NFL or is transferred out or whatever the case may be. that kid stuck around, and he's a doll of a kid. So many great Huskies of those 6-year guys. Cam Davis, my God, the guy, so unlucky. He was healthy. He didn't get to play in the Alamo Bowl a couple of years ago. He got hurt the week of practice before the bowl game and didn't get to go in the Alamo Bowl when the Huskies beat Texas. And then, of course, he blew his ACL out. Didn't get to play the national championship run where they go all the way to the title game. So, I mean, when you have like personal connections, you see these guys. I hope that Husky fans who don't get the chance know that it means everything to these guys to run out that tunnel, to be greeted by their parents. Now that I'm older, I'm like, oh my God, these parents, they're as invested or more so in their kids winning this game than the kids are, right? Like, you just feel it differently as a parent. So there's just a lot of emotions when you get to senior day, especially for guys that have dedicated over half a decade to wearing the purple and gold and the sweat and the blood and everything else they go through 365 days a year. So, senior day, Friday night, I get a little verklempt. I get choked up on senior day, no matter what sport, no matter if it's like UW or not. I just feel for those kids because it's a moment in their life that they won't get back. It's one of those defining moments.
No, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, as a former Husky player, the greatest times of my life were running out of that tunnel, playing on that field, hearing the stadium roar when you make a play in the backfield. Those are the best moments of these kids' lives athletically. Outside of having kids and being married and all that stuff, this is where they've devoted their life to being able to play on that field. And really, there's nothing that matters more. And with these guys that stuck around through so much chaos, they deserve so much. And I hate that they're fighting for a bowl game when they have starters all over the country at Miami and Alabama and Ole Miss. That this team could have been really good this year and could have had another shot at making the college football playoff this year if everybody would have stayed. But those guys stayed. And they stayed because of the love of this university, the love of these fans, and the love of this university in terms of this football team. Didn't matter who the coach was. I mean, I remember talking to Camp Fab, and he says, you know what? I don't care if Mr. Rogers walks through that door. I'm never leaving Husky Stadium. This is my home. And it was the same thing with Bruner. I mean, these guys, it didn't matter. And obviously, they had opportunities, and some of these guys have money through their family. Some of them don't. And for them to stay, these guys deserve so much respect and love. And I really hope the Husky Stadium is absolutely rocking for these guys because they've been through it all. And they'll never forget Friday night. There'll be games that they'll forget about. There'll be stuff that they forget about. But they'll never forget their last football game at Husky Stadium.
You got a thought or two before we go? You got a thought or two, Jordan, on the CFP rankings? You're not happy with the SEC, are you?
No, it's absolutely ridiculous, and we talked about this, briefly. But the ESPN machine and SEC machine, where they're starting to prop up these 3-loss teams, and how they're going to have an opportunity to get to the CFP when you have teams that actually go out and win games. It's absolutely ridiculous, and they're talking about where it doesn't really matter if they lost, their roster's better, or it doesn't really matter if they lost by a touchdown or 3 points. It doesn't matter because they have a higher blue chip ratio than BYU or Indiana or all this stuff. Why even play the damn games then? Let's just cancel the regular season and have the damn best blue chip ratio, 12 teams, and we'll just do a playoff right off the bat. It's absolutely ridiculous what ESPN is setting up to have. They're talking bad about a team like Penn State that would throttle these teams from the SEC. I don't care. Georgia looks garbage. Their quarterback is terrible. Okay? Alabama got trounced by several teams. These teams are not great by any means. The SEC is way down. It's unfortunate to me that the ESPN machine is propping up these teams.
Well, who would?
Go ahead.
Where do you think they got it wrong? I mean, to be fair to Georgia, I mean they did walk into the team that's ranked third in the rankings and handle them in their home turf.
No, absolutely. But to me, when Georgia also got blown out in the first half, they made the game close. But I mean, they were down by 28 or 35 to Alabama, who Alabama lost to Vandy. So I mean, this is not where these teams are unbeatable like they were. Georgia 2-3 years ago, no one was going to beat them. Alabama, when Saban was there, no one was going to beat them. They had better players than everyone. Now, the rosters, there's more parity in college football. Even teams like BYU has guys that come in from the SEC. Wazoo, all these teams have guys that now come from these big conferences that were on these elite teams, and maybe they start on their team. You look at even Oregon, who obviously we all hate. They have guys from all over the country on their team that they picked up the best player from Washington on the secondary, or second best. I'm not going to say he's the best. Jabbar Muhammad. Then they got their quarterback from Oklahoma. I mean, these are teams that are put together now that you cannot just say the SEC has the best players or the best rosters. That's not the way it works. Alabama's not there. Georgia's not there. Ole Miss, Ole Miss, who'd they lose to? Kentucky? Right? So, I mean, these are things that just really bother me when, you know, there's teams all over the country right now. It has to matter if you win your games. It has to matter. If you're undefeated, you got to be. You cannot put teams like they're setting up. They haven't done it yet, but the ESPN machine is trying to set up a 3-loss team or even a 2-loss team to get ahead of an undefeated or a 1-loss team out of the Big 12 or Big 10 would be absolutely ridiculous.
Mm.
I mean, it's we've seen it for years. When I remember in 2016, when you had John Ross and you had Vita Vea and you had a roster full of dudes, and I remember them trying to discredit Washington. Obviously, at the time it was 4 teams in, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, then 1 loss, like what?" And trying to prop up SEC teams. It's been this way forever. That's what it is. It is the SEC teams are given the benefit of every doubt. They're given a margin of error of a game. Nobody else has the margin. You lose a game and you get dropped down to here. The SEC loses a game, they stay right here. They have a 1-game cushion, it seems to me, in the eyes of the talking heads. And that's been the reality for a long, long time.
And they only have 8 conference games.
But it should be no surprise to anyone that has followed it, though. I mean, it's who
Correct.
they employ.
It's
the contract that they have entered in with ESPN. It's the way it's going to be. I mean, it's just why everyone thought it was going to be better, and I laughed at it. I was like, well, it's great to have more teams, and I like having more teams. It'd be fun, but all that means to have more teams, it's going to be that the SEC is just going to want to politician themselves to have the majority of their teams in there as well. So it's
there's
the same.
No question, but we'll see what it happens when, we'll see how the selection committee, the SEC and the talking heads down there. You just got to turn it off because until if they're going to go through, we'll see what happens in the initial. We will see. A
lot of this is drama too. They like to build it up
because otherwise there's nothing to talk about.
Right.
We're talking about it.
Yeah, they like to build it up.
It still bothers me. It still bothers me that we're talking about it because it bothers me because the problem that I see with it though is that perception's reality, and they have a very good way of creating perception. Oh. And now they have obviously Greg Sankey, who is probably the greatest politician that's not in politics, talking about he's always propping up the SEC. When Auburn lost to Cal, I mean, these are teams that, that are not great. They're just not there. And they play 8 conference games. They get 4 cupcakes. They go 5-3 in the SEC, right? 5-3. Now they're 9-3, and everybody thinks, man, this is a great team. USC beat LSU. And UW beat USC. I mean, these are things that have to be talked about and brought up when these crazy folks bring this stuff up.
I heard one time, and it is the truth. It ain't true if you don't believe it. So they can they can talk till they're blue in the face, but if you don't believe it, it's not true.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, Elise Woodward, Jordan Reffett, Puck the Huskies, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Again, their tap room is open 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Go visit them today at georgetownbeer.com. You can find this all episodes up on YouTube. Please subscribe there. Also, check it out on the other podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, one-stop shop up at pucksports.com. Elise, Jordan, we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.
Sounds good. Go Seniors.
Go Dogs, baby.